Hi, it's Sarah Elder, and welcome to the briefing note. It's finally happened. Justin Trudeau, Canada's Prime Minister, has formally announced that he is resigning as the Prime Minister of Canada and the leader of Canada's federal Liberal Party. My initial reaction is he seemed reluctant when talking to the media and finally making this long overdue announcement. It didn't really seem like he understood how much people actually across the entire country are displeased with him. I'm not sure if I'm the only one that felt that way, but it struck me as someone who was very much having to be led to this point. And I'm disappointed by that, to be honest, because I felt like he has become so insulated from the life of everyday Canadians, the people that he actually represents, that it took him this long to make this decision because honestly, it should have been made more than a year ago. This sets up the federal Liberal Party for what will probably be a really short leadership campaign to replace him. And I don't actually know if that favors people who are coming in from outside of the party to really be able to contest it. But we'll have to see. I thought it was really interesting that he said in his speech, quote, "This country deserves a real choice in the next election, and it's become clear to me that if I'm having to fight internal battles, I cannot be the best option in that election." This is what he said. Internal battles, obviously, going back to last month, December, when former finance minister and deputy prime minister Chrystia Freeland announced suddenly in a letter the day that she was expected to give the fall economic update in the House of Commons, that because the prime minister had just days before her issuing that letter saying that she had been asked to no longer serve as Canada's finance minister, to serve in a different role. And she no longer had the confidence of the prime minister. That letter has led us to where we are today. And if it hadn't been for that letter, today wouldn't have happened at all. Because up until that day, and even until today, no other cabinet minister has said publicly that they no longer thought that Justin Trudeau was able to do his job because he no longer not only had the confidence of Canadians, but also of them personally. And that I find extremely disappointing, that it finally took Chrystia Freeland to say, enough, I'm out, I'm walking away. And it has taken about 3 weeks of him hunkering down, not doing any media, having that interaction with the woman on the ski hill in BC where she told him to F off. He finally got to the place last night where he said he told his children that he wasn't going to be running again or continuing it on. So now we sit and wait to find out the rules and timelines and dates of everything that is going to happen. The prime minister, because he still is the prime minister until this change happens, has asked Governor General Mary Simon to prorogue Parliament until March 24th. That means that everything that had been happening in this current Parliament has kind of just magically evaporated and will reset. So the earliest that a motion of no confidence could be brought against the government is March 24th, but they would need, whoever brought it would need the NDP to go along with it. And we don't know if they would, because we know that the NDP are in a tough spot themselves and they're not eager to go to an election. And we know, based on a letter that Jagmeet Singh had sent and made public was that they said that they had had enough. He had finally had enough, and that they would be voting at some point in the spring session or this new session to in a motion of no non-confidence, but they didn't say when. So there are so many things just kind of waiting right now until different decisions are made and different things fall into place. But in the meantime, it seems that both Pierre Poilievre and Jagmeet Singh are continuing with their status quo talking points, and nothing has really changed. I think we're going to hear a lot from conservatives around saying that this is, to some degree, probably undemocratic, which this is all happening actually very democratically, because they just want an election. It's in their best interest to go to an election because they know that they're going to win overwhelmingly, and having to run up against someone new doesn't necessarily work to their advantage in the possibility that they might actually face someone who is competitive. Jagmeet Singh, obviously, very conflicted probably today because his party is doing so abysmally bad in the polls. They don't have the money. They don't have the candidates nominated. They can barely fundraise out of the deficits they create from the last elections that they run, and let alone be able to be in a healthy fiscal point to be able to run another campaign. So anyone who says right now from the outside that they have any idea what's going on truly, I don't think actually knows what they're talking about. We are in a position of having to wait and see what comes forward, probably on a day-to-day basis. What is happening behind the scenes right now is anyone thinking about running a leadership campaign is in the stages of varying degrees of getting their campaign together. Rumored candidates run the gamut from Chrystia Freeland, who before that letter in December, if anyone had said that she was a viable contender to replace Justin Trudeau, most people would have scoffed. But now she actually is polling at the highest percentage of anyone, even overtaking Mark Carney in a new Nanos poll. Other rumored leadership contestants include Melanie Joly, Dominic LeBlanc, Anita Anand, Mark Carney, of course, Christy Clark, the former premier of British Columbia. I saw one report that Sean Fraser might be interested in the job, but to say that anyone has a definitive list is extremely premature. So we'll have to see how things go. But what I want to wrap up this episode of the briefing note by sharing is that the threat of this being another glass cliff moment in Canadian politics, I think the risk is very real. And if you're not sure what I'm talking about, you can go back to the last podcast that I shared, which explained all of this. But really simply, it just means that this has happened before. Brian Mulroney was the then PC prime minister. He had horrible approval ratings. The writing was on the wall. He left. He resigned. There was an internal party leadership race to replace him. Kim Campbell won. She became prime minister because that Mulroney had that position. They went into an election just months after her winning, and people were still really pissed off, and she lost. So Canada has never actually elected in a general election a woman. I think, as I said in my previous podcast, the chances of a woman winning this time are actually pretty good. If it's not Chrystia Freeland, Melanie Joly, Anita Anand, Christy Clark, the list of capable and qualified women is long. And it would be really, really disappointing and frustrating and aggravating to see one of them win, to not be able to run a campaign that distances themselves from Trudeau, have voters still be so pissed off enough that they still punish that person, that woman in the polls, and they are decimated still. And that was why I had come to the conclusion that I didn't actually think it was a good idea for Justin Trudeau to resign. He should have just continued to ride out his legacy, his unpopularity, his unfavorability, and take that to the polls. So at least then the person who came after him would be able to start fresh and say that era of the federal Liberal Party politics is over and we're starting over. There is a very real possibility that that could happen unless someone comes in and runs a campaign, I think, that completely separates and distances themselves from Justin Trudeau. In the same vein that we just watched Kamala Harris lose to Donald Trump in the United States in a uncontested, she was only appointed to be his successor and to run as the presidential candidate for the Democratic Party in the United States. And she was asked, basically, what would you do different? And she said, yeah, not much. I'm paraphrasing. You know, she wasn't able to distance herself. Or maybe she didn't even want to. We don't know. But she wasn't able to do that. And in the minds of voters, they had no interest in another 4 years of someone who wasn't willing to turn the page completely. And they ended up voting for Donald Trump, who is not only going to turn the page, but he is going to burn that fucking book to a crisp. So the dangers of this situation are real for whoever inherits the legacy or takes on the mantle of the leadership of the federal Liberal Party and the prime ministership of Canada. I don't think I'm alone in hoping for the best outcome in this scenario, which is a qualified candidate who is able to run a campaign that completely separates themselves from the policies and positions of the current government and runs a really healthy and vigorous and ideas-based campaign against Jagmeet Singh, Pierre Poilievre, Elizabeth May, and Yves Blanchette, because that's in the best interest of Canada and Canadians. And I think that's what we should all want.